All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to get started here and talk about the Nuclear Energy and the Environment Project. This is the last in the sequence of the three nuclear projects that we're gonna discuss. And next week, we're going to move on to a little bit more information on some renewable energy sources as we move forward in our non-renewable and renewable energy unit. So, couple of housekeeping things, some basics in terms of what are our objectives. Really, the project wants you to be able to describe the types of nuclear fuel waste. It wants you to work on your discussion of the environmental risks and benefits that are associated with nuclear power. We spent a lot of time on this in terms of really the amount of lessons and the projects that you've dealt with. So you should really be able to critically analyze the risks that are associated with the use of nuclear power, and then obviously the benefits, and then finally describing ways of handling with the byproduct of nuclear power, which that those being the radioactive waste that occur. So let's let's first talk a little bit about some basics, okay? Lastly, and as we've gone through this, um, if you go out and you would probably do a survey across the country, you would talk to some individuals who associate nuclear power really with the potential for destruction. Okay, and really, I don't necessarily agree if that's a fair assessment, and that's a question that needs to be answered. Is their assessment of that accurate? Is it right? Okay, really throughout this entire first half of the unit, you've learned the basics of nuclear power. You've learned about generation. Really, what we're trying to get to now is for you to start making some critical analysis to synthesize essentially the benefits and the risks that nuclear power has as it relates to the environment. Okay, so using nuclear energy, just like using anything else, has risks. Okay, but do the risks outweigh the benefits? Okay, some of the things that the lessons have discussed were the dangers associated with the operation of nuclear reactors, to the problem of what do we do with all the spent fuel. Okay, um, so those are questions that need to be analyzed by you as we go through this. Okay, there are other individuals out there that talk about nuclear energy is cleaner, it's cheap, um, but you also have the critics who might adopt it, but they don't necessarily want it in their backyard attitude. Okay, so some of those things to think about when we talk about the advantages, of energy, you have to really think, as with all things, that everything there's a trade-off in everything that we do. Okay, sure, it produces cleaner energy than burning fossil fuels. It doesn't have air pollution, or it doesn't create toxic mercury byproducts. But it does produce hazardous waste. So, things to think about in reference to that. Okay. Um, your lesson goes over a lot of the advantages and disadvantages. So I would strongly recommend that you look at the pros and the cons that's in chart format. Okay. We need to talk about radiation being that one of those consequences of the fissioning process that's found in nuclear power plants. Okay. Yeah, sure. We have containment structures. We have environmental regulations and legislative guidelines. Okay. However, as we've seen, especially those of you in recent years, know that, as with natural disasters come issues of, the safety of these nuclear power plants. For example, Fukushima Daiichi over in Japan in 2011, as a result of the devastating tidal wave that came on shore. And for those of you who have parents that certainly remember the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, back in the 80s, as well as maybe some who, if some of your parents were Pennsylvania residents, probably remember the 1979 um, disaster that occurred at 3 Mile Island outside of Harrisburg. So, um, all of those things really need to be taken into account as you talk about, or as you think about the risks and the benefits that are associated with nuclear energy and the environment. And then, of course, finally dealing with where do we put all the waste, okay? And the three types of waste that your lesson goes over, that being the low-level waste, the transuranic waste, and then, of course, the high-level rad waste, which is really the big sticking point of, how do we transverse our country with such high level, high security, in what some view as very dangerous radioactive waste that are going through people's backyards, to seal it into a repository somewhere, for generations. So things to think about. A lot of things to think about. So with that, let's get into the project. Okay. So what's the assignment about? Okay. Um, all of this really, with the exception of a few things, and we'll talk about that, can be found really in the lesson. Okay. So the first question asks you to describe some of the safety precautions that are taken while transporting spent fuel rods and other nuclear waste anywhere it needs to go. Okay. So your lesson really your lesson discusses that. You can certainly look in there. But really, what I would also recommend is that down here, you have actually two sites to help you with the project. And while the lesson is going to give you a nice foundational knowledge, these two hyperlinks down here at the bottom are really where you're going to want to go. The United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission fact sheet on radioactive waste is a great spot, as well as the transport of radioactive materials by the World Nuclear Association. Strongly recommend that you visit both of those websites and do a really good cursory review of them, because these sites are going to give you a ton of answers in terms of what you're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to just go to one here and just pull one up. All right, this is the World Nuclear Association, and it talks about the transport of radioactive materials, so you can see how they're being transported, where they're found, some of the notes, examples of the rad waste. So this is going to be a really helpful site for you, as well as if you go to the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, this is really another great website that's going to help you answer a lot of questions, particularly in the storage and disposal section as well. Okay, so it talks about low-level waste, it talks about high-level waste, and it talks about how things get moved around. So two really great sites. Okay, so for this, describe some of the safety precautions that need to be taken. Tell me about what's being done, why these things are being transported. Okay, a couple of sentences. Number two, which U.S. government body sets limits on the transport of spent fuel rods, and then name four other government agencies involved in the management and transport of high-level rad waste. Again, using these sites, you should be able to come up with those. You can, give me one or two sentences and then bullet the other government organizations. I'm totally fine with that. And then number three, make a table inserted in a Word document that shows the three types of nuclear waste and examples of where they come from and how do they dispose of it. You can copy or paste this, or you can create your own in Word. You can write one on a tablet, take a picture, and upload it. It doesn't matter. Remember the three types of waste. You have low level, you have transuranic, and you have high level. Okay, and if you go to these websites, it talks about, and even in your lesson, it talks about where they come from and how do they get rid of them. Okay, and that's what I'm looking for. Can you essentially give me that information back? Can you compose that information back to me? And then finally, this is really where you start to come into this, where your ability to synthesize all the information from what you read in the lesson and on those two websites. Give me three advantages, and you can do this in a bullet or you can do this in a paragraph. It doesn't matter. Give three advantages and three disadvantages of nuclear power, okay? And support each, and this is important, support each with evidence, okay? You can give me the three advantages and disadvantages and then go underneath with a paragraph that provides support for those, or you can weave them all into a paragraph, okay? It doesn't matter. I'm looking for at the very least, a complete and detailed paragraph. So this should be 5, 6, 7 sentences that go over each of these and provide support. And please tell me where you've provided the support from, whether it's from those websites. You can use that in your works cited page, or you can cite them parenthetically. Okay. You can attach all that and submit it to me, or you can certainly copy and paste it all into here as well. It doesn't much matter. If you have any questions or you're getting stuck while you're doing this, certainly come into the VL. I'll be more than happy to help get you back on track. And next week, we're going to be back here talking a little bit more about some renewable energy sources as we move forward in the lesson. So have a great week, everybody.